the cumulative reading, question and discussion, and maximal informativeness. So, Linmin, the floor is yours. So can you start?
So good afternoon, everyone. I have pre-recorded my talk, so I'm going to play the video.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I am Linmin Zhang. Today I'm going to talk about cumulative
Can you stop the video? So we cannot hear you.
Okay.
For some reason.
Okay. Let me restart. And okay.
Can you try again?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I am Linmin Zhang. Today I'm going to talk about cumulative reading, question and discussion, and maximal. Is it working?
So, yeah, can you go back to the start and then, yeah, now I think we are okay.
Okay. So I will just continue, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Informativeness. Let's start with the cumulative reading. So as shown in 1 and 2, exactly 3 boys saw exactly 5 movies. In Guatemala, at most 3% of the population own at least 70% of the land. These are the core data I'm going to talk about today. So for the first sentence, it means that there is a group of boys and each of them saw some movies, and there is a group of movies such that each of the movies was seen by some boys. So in total, the cardinality of all boys who saw movies is 3, and the cardinality of all movies that was seen by boys is 5. The sentence 1 has also a distributive reading. There are exactly 3 boys, and each of them saw exactly 5 movies. I am not going to talk about this distributive reading today, so I will only focus on the cumulative reading. The second sentence obviously also has a cumulative reading. A group of a population together owns some amount of the land. And if we look into the quantity of the population and the land, it's at most 3% of the entire population and at least 70% of the entire land. So today I'm going to show you that the cumulative reading and a step-by-step compositional derivation for the cumulative reading actually depends on an underlying degree question and underlying question and discussion. So in a given context, a good cumulative reading sentence addresses the underlying question and discussion with maximal informativeness. So I will start with Brasiliano's analysis for cumulative reading sentences like 1 and show why this account cannot work for sentences like 2. To provide a unified compositional analysis for all the cumulative reading sentences, I will propose to adopt a degree QD-based view on maximal informativeness. With regard to the maximality of informativeness, I will also compare the current degree QD-based view with the canonical entailment-based view. It has long been observed that modified numerals contribute maximality. So 3a and 3b are different in that it is felicitous to say Mary fed 2 dogs, they are cute, perhaps she fed more. But it is not felicitous to say Mary fed at least 2 dogs, they are cute, perhaps she fed more. Therefore, at least 2 dogs here must denote and count the totality of dogs fed by Mary. The use of modified numerals in cumulative reading sentences also involves this notion of maximality. Also, it is worth noting that this notion of maximality is relativized. Under this given scenario, it is evident that exactly 3 boys saw exactly 5 movies is true, so this sentence is true. Although actually in this context, there are in total 4 boys and 6 movies. Therefore, exactly 3 boys denotes and accounts the totality of boys who saw movies, so not all the boys in the context. And exactly 5 movies denotes and account the totality of movies seen by any boys, not the totality of all movies in the context. So it's a relativized maximality. So based on our intuitive interpretation for the cumulative reading, Brasiliano proposes an account within the framework of dynamic semantics. Here I only show a sketch of his ideas. So essentially, the contribution of modified numerals can be divided into two parts. First, they work like indefinites in introducing discourse reference, which are potentially plural individuals. Restrictions like boy, movie, and scene relations are then added onto this discourse reference. It is after this step, modified numerals again come into play again. They impose maximality tests so that the mereologically maximal boy sum and movie sum that satisfy all these restrictions can be picked out. And then these modified numerals also contribute cardinality tests, and we check whether the cardinality of the maximal movie sum is 5 and whether the cardinality of the maximal boy sum is 3. And crucially, as shown by Brasiliano, the application of the two maximality operators here is based on mereology, and they need to be applied simultaneously. So in other words, in this kind of cumulative reading sentences, neither modified numerals take scope of the other one. Now I'm going to present a challenge to this analysis. So although Brasiliano's analysis works very well for exactly 3 boys saw exactly 5 movies and fully captures our intuition, so this analysis cannot work immediately for sentences like 2. In Guatemala, at most 3% of the population own at least 70% of the land. As pointed out by Krivka, the simultaneous mereology-based maximization strategy would lead us to select the alternative. In Guatemala, 1% of the population or 1% of the land, which clearly is not the most informative one among the alternatives. As a matter of fact, it is pretty uninformative. Krivka further points out that what is peculiar with sentences like 2 is that they want to give information about the bias of a statistical distribution. One conventionalized way of expressing particularly biased distributions is to select a small set among one dimension that is related to a larger set of the other dimension. Therefore, Krivka's discussion suggests that in uttering this sentence, we're not really interested in how many people own how much land in Guatemala. Rather, we care about the issue of how skewed its wealth distribution is in Guatemala. So my proposal is exactly based on this idea. So sentence 2 addresses a degree question. How skewed is wealth distribution in Guatemala? To what extent is this skewedness? Here, I first use 2 examples to show that it is not whether a number is maximal or minimal that contributes to our reasoning on informativeness. It's rather the underlying degree question. For example, for the sentence, it's 7 o'clock. If the QD here is how late it is, then it's 7 o'clock essentially means it's as late as 7 o'clock. And we intuitively feel that it's as late as 7 o'clock is more informative than it's as late as 6 o'clock. Therefore, under this QD, higher informativeness corresponds to higher degree of lateness, correlating with the increase of numbers. On the other hand, if the QD is how early it is, then it's 7 o'clock means rather it's as early as 7 o'clock. And evidently, it's as early as 7 o'clock is not more informative than it's as early as 6 o'clock. It's rather the other way around. So in this case, higher informativeness would correspond to a higher degree of earliness and correlating with the decrease of numbers. So similarly, numbers in a measurement sentence do not directly indicate how we reason on informativeness. It's rather the underlying degree question that determines how we reason on informativeness. So if we are interested in how tall John is, then higher informativeness correlates with higher degree of tallness and with the increase of numbers. However, if we flip the direction of the scale and become interested in how short Zhang is, then higher informativeness would mean rather higher degree of shortness, which correlates with the decrease of numbers. So overall, it should be evident that numbers themselves do not indicate whether the increase or decrease of numbers leads to higher informativeness. It is rather the underlying degree questions that determine how numbers are associated with informativeness. Whether it's the increase or decrease of numbers that leads to higher informativeness depends on this degree QD. So more specifically, maximal informativeness does not necessarily correlate with maximal numbers. So based on this, we can have a closer look at our core data and what underlying QDs these cumulative reading sentences address. So for the sentence, exactly 3 boys saw exactly 5 movies. It most naturally addresses issues like how many boys saw how many movies, or how much is the overall film consumption among boys. If we plot the cardinality of boy sums and the cardinality of the total movie sum that each boy sum saw, then the maximally informative true answer to this degree question would correspond to the right uppermost corner in this figure, where we find the cardinalities of the mereologically maximal boy sum and the movie sum. However, for this sentence, in Guatemala, at most 3% of the population own at least 70% of the land. So as Krefka pointed out, it most naturally addresses issues like how skewed is wealth distribution in Guatemala. So if we plot the amount of land and their owner population, then the dots should constitute this kind of parallelogram-like area. And in this case, the maximally informative true answer to the underlying degree question corresponds to the left uttermost corner, where we find the ratio between the amount of the land and the population of its owner is maximal. So now we're ready to formally derive the meaning of cumulative reading sentences in a step-by-step compositional way. So I also follow Brasviano and Burnford's idea to implement the formal analysis in a dynamic semantics framework so that we can split the two contributions of modified numerals, introducing discourse reference and later impose maximality and cardinality tests at the sentential level. So a meaning derivation will be a series of updates from an information state to another, and an information state is represented as a function from an input assignment function to an output assignment functions, to a set of output assignment functions. So what is different from Brasviano is that here the proposed maximality operator is QD based, not mereology based. So with the application of this operator, the discourse reference that lead to the maximal informativeness in addressing a degree QD will be selected out. In this sense, within this maximality operator, the operator G QD is applied on discourse reference and returns a value indicating informativeness. This amounts to a measurement in addressing a contextually salient degree QD. So in other words, here this operator GQD works like a measure function. So for a sentence like exactly 3 boys saw exactly 5 movies, as mentioned earlier, it addresses how much is the film consumption among boys and the maximal informativeness corresponds to the cardinalities of maximal boy sum and movie sum. Therefore, after the introduction of discourse reference, with the application of the maximality operator, the mereologically maximal boy sum and movie sum are picked out, and then we check their cardinalities. However, for a sentence like at most 3% of the population or at least 70% of the land, the analysis is similar, but with a crucial difference with regard to how informativeness would be measured. Here, crucially, given that it addresses how skewed wealth distribution is in Guatemala. Maximal informativeness would correspond to the maximal ratio between the amount of land and its owners. Therefore, after the introduction of discourse reference, with the application of the maximality operator, the discourse reference that lead to this highest ratio value would be picked out. And then again, we check their cardinalities. So overall, we have seen that how numbers contribute to sentence interpretation, especially the reasoning on informativeness, depends on an underlying degree QD. For cumulative reading sentences with different QDs, the way that numbers contribute to informativeness reasoning is different. Eventually, these numbers are interpreted in a way that will lead to maximal informativeness or highest degree in addressing a degree question. Mereology-based maximality is now considered a special case in this unified degree QD-based view on maximal informativeness. The current degree QD-based view on maximal informativeness is slightly different from the canonical entailment-based view. Here, I adopted the version of Fonfinto 2014. A similar idea has been proposed by Schlenker in 2012. According to this entailment-based view, higher informativeness is based on entailment relation between two propositions. For upward monotone properties, maximal informativeness involves maximal values. So for example, if Miranda is 1.65 meters tall, it follows necessarily and entails that Miranda is 1.6 meters tall. So however, for downward monotone properties, maximal informativeness means minimal values. If, for example, 200 grams of walnuts are sufficient to make a pan of baklava, then it follows necessarily and therefore entails that 300 grams, 400 grams of walnuts would be sufficient to make a pan of baklava. I think the current degree QD-based view on informativeness is more advantageous than this canonical entailment-based view in two aspects. So first, the current degree QD-based view is more generalized in dealing with cases where there are multiple numbers. So clearly, in this sentence, at most 3% of the population own at least 70% of the land. The inference on informativeness is not based on maximizing or minimizing one of the numbers alone, but rather by maximizing the ratio between the two numbers. And this is not a random action. This is fundamentally motivated by the underlying degree question and the discussion behind this sentence. And second, sometimes higher informativeness does not necessarily involve entailment relations. And this can, but still we will feel like there is stronger meaning or a higher informativeness. And that's where the current QD-based view would be different from the entailment-based view. So for example, under this sentence, actually, although under this scenario, exactly 3 boys saw exactly 5 movies is true, but an alternative sentence, exactly 1 boy saw exactly 4 movies is false. So no boy here saw more than 3 movies. So in other words, here sentence 1 does not really entail sentence 1 prime, but still we intuitively tend to agree that sentence 1 conveys a stronger meaning. So this can be accounted for under the current proposal. So compared to the alternative sentences like sentence 1 prime, sentence 1 still indicates a higher level of film consumption. Therefore, sentence 1 is actually more informative in addressing the underlying degree QD. So how high is film consumption among boys? Finally, I'd also like to suggest that the current degree QD-based view on informativeness might have a broader application beyond the interpretation of sentences with numbers. So in this case, imagine Pooh and friends coming upon a bush of thistles. Eel, the only one known for favor thistles, takes a bite but spits it out. Under this scenario, we can naturally say, even Eel spit those thistles out. The use of even here is focus sensitive. But this even sentence cannot be used to answer questions like who spit thistles out or who was unlikely to spit thistles out. So if we ask who was unlikely to spit thistles out, even Eel spit them out sounds weird and not a felicitous answer here. Nevertheless, if we ask a question like how prickly are those thistles, then even thistles spit them out is a perfect answer. Therefore, the use of this even sentence actually addresses a degree query and tells us about how prickly those thistles are. The meaning contribution of even eel here is parallel with the meaning contribution of modified numerals in cumulative reading sentences. In both cases, they represent an extreme case that leads to a maximal degree in addressing a degree query, resulting in maximal informativeness. So here is the take-home message of my talk. I have proposed a new view, a degree query-based view on maximal informativeness. I have adopted this view to give a unified account for two kinds of cumulative reading sentences. They are different because they address different kinds of queries. Therefore, the numbers in these sentences contribute to sentence interpretation, especially the influence on informativeness in different ways. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. We have 9 minutes for discussions and questions. And so if anybody in the audience have any questions, please come here. And if online attenders have questions, please indicate by using raising a hand function or something like that.
Thank you very much. So not so quite clear about your notion of informativeness. So you compare different, I guess you compare different degree of informativeness. So can you go back to the page 25 with these two examples and clarify why there is exactly 3 boy and exactly 1 boy?
Page 25, right? This one?
Yes. And why do you say one is more informative than 1 prime?
So I think that the sentence one, so if our underlying interest behind this utterance is like how many boys or how many movies, or like to what extent is the film consumption level among boys, then in that sense, sentence one indicates a higher level of film consumption than sentence one prime. So you can see that it gives us an overall more informative picture about this. So I think it's in that sense, in addressing this underlying degree query, that sentence one is more informative than sentence one prime. So sentence one indicates a higher level of film consumption. So it's like when we address the question like how tall is Mary? So the answer that Mary is 6 feet tall is more informative than say Mary is 5 feet tall. So although in that case, the entailment relation also holds, but in this case, actually, given this scenario, the truth of the sentence one does not really guarantee the truth of sentence one prime. So I think that the use of higher degree in indicating higher informativeness might be more useful than the notion of entailment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So this might be a clarification question, but so as opposed to Brazilian, you are saying that there is only one maximality operator, right?
Oh, what?
So as opposed to Brazilian, assumes there are two maximality operators that are attached to each kind of modified numerals, but you are saying that there is only one maximality operator, large N, right?
Yeah, so that is my proposal. So
My question is, where exactly is that operator kind of derived in your composition?
So indeed, so actually in Brasiliano's account, so each of the modified numerals brings their maximality operator. But in my analysis, so basically I propose that there is this operator that is actually will be from the context. So this will be like a context-based measurement of informativeness. So essentially it works like a measurement function. So I should go to this page. So you can see that here actually it is this item that is from the context that takes the discourse reference and give back an overall measurement value on this. So I think that in my analysis, so the maximality operator actually would be from the context. It's not really from the each modified numerals independently, but rather taking the discourse reference as a whole and then compute an overall measurement, informativeness measurement on them.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was really clear.
you.
So Chairman has a question. So can you unmute yourself and then ask a question? Yeah.
The session. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, why does number one not entail number two?
Why does
Have you thought about it?
number one entail number two?
No. Why not?
Why not? I think that overall it sounds like there are some. So for example, if we consider like along a scale like a length scale or like tallness scale, so overall oftentimes like the adjectives between a pair of adjectives like tall and short. So one of the item might be more marked than the other one. So short should be more marked than its opposite tall. So I think that in our daily life, we are more used to adopt the default degree question like how tall something is rather than like how short something is, how many like there are something, or rather than like how few there are something. So I think that it's because of that that in most cases we do not think one entails two. But if in a given context, like how many walnuts would be sufficient to make a pan of baklava? So in that kind of scenario, when we consider a downward monotone property like sufficient, I think that we will naturally flip the scale and think that 100 grams of walnuts are sufficient would entail like 200 grams of walnuts would be sufficient.
Thank you. That might be a correct intuition, but exactly is kind of a negatively oriented operator. That's why I think. You can think about it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And Anastasia, you have a question as well, right? So can you unmute yourself and ask a question?
Oh, yes. Can I ask a question? I think I'm trying to remember it. I think in your talk, you showed as an example of the kind of maximality effects, some pronoun, plural pronoun linking back to a plural antecedent. And there you get this maximal interpretation of the pronoun.
Ah,
Are you kind of assuming that your question under discussion, maximalizing introducing mechanism, is it work there too?
I see. So, so whether like the interpretation of bare numerals and modified numerals, might be different with regard to underlying QDs. Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, but I haven't thought about this interaction.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I mean, this kind of I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with the literature around exhaustification.
Yeah.
Because Henk Sivak back in 1998 or 1999 had a very similar story where exhaustification was the trigger for introducing these kind of links where a plural value picks up a plural. Well, anyway, it has a very similar feeling to what you've been talking about here. So if you haven't looked at that stuff, the exhaustification stuff that Henk Sivak did, I think is kind of similar in feeling, at least.
Okay, so thank you for referencing me to this. I will check this literature. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We ran out of time, so let's thank the speaker again. Thank you.